Okay, clothing art, and away we go. Um, so I made up this lecture a number of years ago, and it's based off of this book here, Clothing Art. So let's go. Ah, let's start out with a bang. So this is Sir Joshua Reynolds, um, and um, he was a portrait painter of the 1700s in England. And he's really, along with Gainsborough, considered to be um, one of the greatest portrait painters of all time. And this period is called the Grand Manner period of the painting of the aristocratic women. I like both of these. I think they have some interesting similarities as far as the palette, the blue ribbon in their hair, and yeah. In the background, sometimes is actually landscapes that peers of these two women would have been familiar with, perhaps. Of course, the English aristocracy's wealth was wrapped up in their landscapes, so um, it makes sense that you have them in the background. This is just sort of miscellaneous. It's the tailor on the left, and then the another tailor on the, well, they're both tailors. Sorry about that. Um, and I really like the one on the right. It's by Ralph Earl. A little bit of a kind of a quirky American portrait painter for sure. And then the one on the left is by Moroni, um, who has become a little bit more well known from an exhibition about 4 or 5 years ago. And it's just nice to see people in their, sort of job setting. And that's definitely true for these two guys. Okay, so here's an interesting little comparison. So on the left is the very famous Monet's Luncheon on the Grass, done in 1862. And on the right is what Monet was probably looking at, which is the concert. And so you can, have a little bit of fun comparing the two there. Um, of course, what's striking in Monet's painting is the woman, Victorine. What his favorite model is nude, and the two men are clothed. And there's even more of an emphasis with it when you see all the clothing to the left that Victorine was wearing. And this painting caused a huge scandal um, in the salon in France. And yeah, so a little comparison there. Okay, what about self portraits? They're a fascinating thing for sure. Um, and so here, I can't go back with this system that I'm using. So I think we've got Jean Baptiste de Champagne, horrible French speaker, by the way. I am. And then you've got, yes, the double portrait, um, double self portrait. Wow. Okay. I think he was into himself, which, which is interesting. I mean, not you, instead of just doing one self portrait, let's do a double. And so that's what's happening in this one. All right, so this guy on the left was one of the most popular painters, particularly of Louis XIV. This self portrait is actually from 1730. And then you have Rosabal Carrera, who has a self portrait as Winter. And what I like about these two is it's showing, artists in their older age, I guess, which you don't see as much in the history of art. Yeah, and the woman on the right was an incredible pastel artist. Okay, maybe you've heard about Vigie Lebrun in my classroom before or classrooms. This is a self-portrait. She was one of the leading portrait painters, if not the leading portrait painter of her time. And she was the portrait painter for Marie Antoinette. So she had to leave France once the revolution starts in 1789. And then this is Peter Paul Rubens's painting of, I think it's just a woman. He's famous for doing portraits of his wife. But it's kind of interesting how the similarities between these two, and they're very far apart as far as date. So what are we looking at? Well, more than 100 years between them. All right, so that's Vigée Lebrun and a little bit of Peter Paul Rubens. And then I always enjoy looking at artist studios. I don't know about you guys. And so, wow, what a bunch of paintings in the studio on the left, which is in great contrast to there's a lot of objects in Vermeer's artist in the studio as well, but not as many as on the left. And so you have this work from 1740. Well, it's a little bit after Vermeer. And of course, Vermeer is one of the most famous artists of all time in art history. And he's painting a muse, which is always fun to see. You've got some Turkish rug. You've got, what do you have in the background? I think it's a map. And this might be the only painting of Vermeer, although he has his back to you. But that's kind of interesting to think about. Like, what would he look like? That could be a kind of a cool assignment in class. Like, paint Vermeer or draw Vermeer as you think he would look. All right, and then this one I put in here because, we have to have more women artists. And so she's looking in the mirror. And unfortunately, of course, society, this is an 1845 painting. So even in this time, women weren't trained at the level that men were, and also women didn't have the opportunities that male artists had. So a lot of times they did self-portraits. And a lot of times, of course, they did that with looking in the mirror. Okay, studio assistants. This is a fascinating story. So on the left is a painting of Velázquez's Slave. And it's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's one of their most cherished paintings. And it's interesting. So he must have been a studio assistant in Velázquez's studio, because at some point, and I think Velázquez was in Italy, and he freed this man, Juan de Pereira. Apologies to everybody that speaks Spanish. And what's interesting about this story is that Velázquez's former slave actually becomes a fairly decent artist. And there was a exhibition just a couple of years ago of his art. And I don't really know much about the one on the right. I'm assuming she was an assistant in Carrera's studio. And then on the left, you've got Degas doing a painting with a mannequin, which is fascinating. And then on the right, you have another mannequin painted almost as if, it's a live person, which is, I thought these two were really interesting. I'm glad I put them in the lecture today. Okay, let's go to some art historical references. So the painting on the left is from 1909 to 1913, and it's definitely being influenced by the Maids of Honor by Velázquez, who we just talked about. Velázquez is on the left of the right painting, painting the painting within the painting. That's always kind of fun. And then there's the princess and her court, her entourage. And then on the left, I think what's interesting about this, and this is, of course, what the book is about, um, is that, it's clothing of the time, right? What are we looking at for the date? Yeah, 1909, early 1900s. A lot has changed. That's for sure. And it'd be kind of fun to compare the dogs. That's fun. Jennifer's been watching one of the dog shows, and yeah, she knows her dogs. Okay, so the in bold on your I don't know if you guys are gonna have sheets, but is it too much? Question mark. And certainly Elizabeth I is famous for having for sitting for a number of different portraits throughout her reign. She was England, right? And she is obviously showing the wealth of England, which was vastly improved under her reign. I don't know if you ever had a chance to watch the two movies, recent movies with Elizabeth. The first one was done, and then 10 years later it was done. And I'm forgetting the actress's name, but anyways, if you're a huge fan of Elizabeth, make sure you watch those two movies. Okay. Everybody knows I love a good preparatory sketch. And so on the left is Peter Paul Rubens. We talked about him just a couple of seconds ago. And this is the Countess of Arundel with her entourage, and Robin, the Countess Arundel's dwarf. And so on the right is the let me look at this. Yeah, is it a child or is it a dwarf? Oh, it's a dwarf, I think. Yeah, and so it's always interesting to compare the preparatory drawing and the final piece. I think there's always really great discussions that can erupt from seeing what the final product was with the oil painting and comparing it to the preliminary sketch. Okay, next is it's a stunner. So it's Rubens again, and it is a Spanish aristocrat, all decked out. One of the things that happens with clothing history is that one of the things that's being sort of emphasized with these elaborate outfits is that you'd have to have 3 to 4 to 5 servants to get into it. And then the other thing is, of course, keeping everything white, and that would take a number of different people as well. So the wealth is emphasized, of course, with the silk and everything else, but it's also emphasized with how hard it would be to get into it. And then you also have Velázquez's Lady with Fan, and it's kind of an unusual one for him. I don't even know if looking at it, I would necessarily know that it's a Velázquez painting, to be honest. Although, of course, he painted the court in the 1630s. But it just looks a little bit different to me. And it's kind of, what would be interesting is talking about what has changed between, let's see, so you've got about a 24-year difference between when these works were made. And it's quite a difference in style at the court, which, of course, is why we're talking about these things, right? It's why the book was published, Clothing Art. Yeah, so this is a good one. This is a good sort of comparison for sure. So, who has the highest hair? So there's this scene in Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette, where this hairdresser comes in and has what's called a fontage. I think I'm pronouncing that actually right, even though I'm not great with French. And in the scene, she starts rising up from her chair, and the hair just keeps going and going and going, sort of like this. Now, we already looked at Joshua Reynolds. We started off with him, actually. Um, and so, again, these are English aristocratic women, and they like their hair stacked. Um, and on the right is a Gainsborough. You're almost guaranteed when you go into a major art museum, you're almost guaranteed that when you see a young woman with gray hair, that is going to be a work by Gainsborough, without a doubt. And I find that fascinating. I've talked about that in class before. How will we ever go back to that? Will we ever go back to a particular style in which young women have gray hair? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it is already happening and I'm not aware of it. Okay, so that's kind of fun. And then back to sort of situating fashion uh, within the setting in which it's actually made. We have on the left Taylor's Workshop. Both of these are from the Dutch 17th century, which was a time of incredible economic uh, richness in the Netherlands. And, I always look at these, especially on the left, the whole idea of an apprenticeship. These, looks like, does it look like at least one young boy is working away in the tailor shop, and you wonder what kind of sort of conversation is happening between the man and the woman. And yeah, so tailor shops in the 17th century, and then on the right, I don't know if I can see this very well. So what does it say here? Hold on a second. The lace maker. Okay, cool. I had a student do her end of the semester project on lace making. This is a number of years ago, but I'm kind of interested in lace, to be honest. And I'm pretty sure there is a lace museum. I think in France. So there you go. Okay. Oh yeah. Now I'm remembering. Oh, sorry. I'm not ready to go there. Okay, black is not only for bohemian artists, says me. And so on the left is a woman from the Netherlands from 1628. And here again, the white, I never know what to call it. It's not really a collar. So anyways, all white, has to be kept white by servants. And then also the black here is really talking about Protestantism, right? Not to look like you're trying to impress anybody, but you really are, because the actual cloth is very expensive. But is it subdued? I don't know. I mean, would it have been considered to be subdued back in that time frame? That's interesting to think about that. I like how her hair is up and covered. That's kind of cool as well. And then on the right, gosh, we're seeing a lot of Peter Paul Rubens. I don't know why. Helen Vermet. So this is the 1630s. They're only 2 years apart. So Peter Paul Rubens is from what's called Flanders, which in a way doesn't exist anymore. It's now a part of Belgium, and I think a little bit of France, but I think it's more Belgium. And so if you're from Flanders, you would be called Flemish. And what's interesting, I think, about this comparison is perhaps it's looking at the difference between what's happening in the Netherlands and then south of the Netherlands, Belgium. So there's definitely a contrast between how these women are presented. Now we can go to Cate Blanchett, and she's the one I was trying to think of. She's the actress that was Elizabeth twice, 10 years apart in the movie Land. And here I wanted to sort of emphasize, and I don't think I got this from the book. I think I got this just from my own movie viewing, how color can give out certain messages, particularly with characters in movies. And here she's in Thor Ragnarok. I don't even know how to pronounce it. I'll just be honest. Ragnar. No? All right, my son could help me with that. And then here she is on the left in Indiana Jones, the fourth movie, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I liked. Everybody hated that movie. Everybody hated the fifth one too. I was like okay with the fifth one. Here she is as a Russian soldier. I think she was a colonel or something like that. And then on the right, you have her as the peaceful woman in the Lord of the Rings in white. So that's kind of fun to look at all that with Cate Blanchett. Okay, on the left is both are these women, I believe, are in wedding dresses. I don't know if you could figure that out right away either one of these really. Again, going back to that idea of wearing black as a Protestant, but then again, I mean, she's got this bling bling up front, and the gloves. What's up with the gloves? Very emphasized in the painting on the left, and then on the right is a guy with his bride in a lovely silk. Is it kind of gray outfit? Yeah, I like how he's kind of looking at her. That's nice. Sometimes you don't see that with couples showing affection. I mean, I think you definitely come up with that here. Oh, wow. I'm really into these women with their black on. Okay, I don't think we need to talk about these two anymore. Let's do a timeout on that one. Okay. All right. So in the Netherlands, some people made their fortunes from the slave trade. And this was not really something that was discussed in art history, certainly when I was in college in the 80s. But I would say over the last 10 years, there's been more of a honesty about this fact. And it's interesting when you look at a portrait and you see a young slave with, in this case, a couple. And it really brings home the fact that some of the art that you look at, particularly in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, was paid for with money that they made through this horrendous, just horrible system of slavery. So I'm glad that the Dutch are being more honest about it. Okay, so I talk about this one a lot in other classes, so I'm just kind of I'll go through it, but I'm not gonna go through it, detail upon detail. But so this is going to be a series of works. We're going to look at 6 of the paintings from William Hogarth's Marriage a la Mode. And this is a satirical look at the English aristocracy. So while Sir Joshua Reynolds and Thomas Gainsborough were painting them in all their glory, William Hogarth is doing something different. And when I think about satire, I always think about him. So this is the marriage contract. On the left is the bride. On the far left is the groom. They are not together, so to speak. And they never are, really, through this whole series. And this is the most famous of the paintings from this series. And they've been out all night partying, and their accountant is furious and has had enough. And then in this one, he again is just getting his hair done on the left, and then she's falling in love with, I think, the lawyer on the right. And then they're having an affair, and the husband comes in, and he has a sword fight with the lawyer, and he dies. And then the last one, thank goodness, this is a tough one to look at. The woman is dying on the chair. Okay, now let's go to masquerades. And so on the left is Longy's exhibition of a rhinoceros at the Carnival of Venice. And so this type of animal was, seen as exotic and very, and then the whole masquerade thing. I mean, I don't know all that much about Longy, but I always know it's his work because I see the masquerade. That's like his calling card. You always know it's him. And then Tiepolo's The Minuet is on the right. And Tiepolo, of course, is this, very highly regarded, beloved artist of the 1700s. Okay, let's have a little fun. Let's determine who we would escort to a party. So on the left is a painting that's in the Getty, I think. I'm pretty sure it's a Getty, or it's a painting by Lyotard in the Getty. And we've been talking all about these servants getting on these these outfits for women, and here you see it with this really fun sort of unnatural light at night. And then in the middle, it's actually called Before the Ball, so there you go. And it's a masquerade, obviously. The palette is fascinating. It's kind of a quirky painting. And then on the right, 1756 is a Baroness. There's a lot of contrast between the one in the middle and the one on the right. Even though, yeah, they're all in the 1700s. Yeah, okay. And then if you've ever seen, what's that movie called? So, there was an aristocrat who had a baby, outside of England with a woman of color, and one of the men, the English aristocrats that were heavily involved in the movement to end slavery in England, took on the raising of his brother's child, and so that's what you're seeing. These two women, kind of the same age, I think, who were a part of this aristocrat's family. And I'll try and think of the movie at some point. Okay, and then we saw the one on the left already, and I think what's being emphasized here is that... how are we doing here? Oh, now we're going back to Rubens. Okay, cool. So, yeah, what's being emphasized here is that Thomas Gainsborough was probably looking at Rubens' Helen Vermet on the left. Okay, yeah, that's the story there. And it's just a classic Thomas Gainsborough, with the hair high up, the landscape in the background, the column, and the beautiful dress. Okay, and then if you ever have a chance to go to LA, go to Pasadena and see the most famous portrait of a young man. Yeah, absolutely. The Blue Boy. So, what happens is that in the late 19th century, because of the Second Industrial Revolution and because American goods were flooding the English market, I just found out about that just very recently. Um, the price of land bottomed out. And so all of these families who derive their wealth from land went bankrupt. And so you had Gilded Age billionaires who went over, or their agents went over, to England and bought up all of these English portraits. And so, what are they doing in Pasadena, California? That's why they're there. And then on the right is a very famous one too, but not as famous as the Gainsborough on the left. So yeah, anytime and they're at the Huntington Library and Art Museum and Gardens. So when you have a chance, go see these two portraits. Okay, and then last but not least, I hope this is a good one. Yeah, it's my fave. So this one is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I love it. You've probably seen it in my classroom before. I love the fur muff that she's holding. I also like the sky a lot. And this is Sir Thomas Lawrence's Elizabeth Farren, later Countess of Derby. Which I think is a perfect end to into the lecture. Okay, I hope you enjoyed clothing art. Thank you very much.